Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This reports for the 19th. Well, we can see a fade off. They were not happy. The fact that Powell just refuses to be cooperative. It's interesting, though, when you compare it last November when he had, well, actually before that, he had similar economic readings from everything. With the opposite situation where inflation was rising, he went ahead and cut 50 basis points, but now he has the exact same detail with lower inflation and does nothing. Doesn't make any sense, and you can see why. None of the tariff situation has resulted in anything that they expected, and we outlined the reasons why. Because you're not required to buy a product that costs more if it did, and plain and simple. That ends the story right there. The rest of it is just stupid talk. From an NBI reading, though, we can see that trail off here. We dropped below that 33, which is something we were talking about, and that's leading to the continuation so far, and NBI white rising within that. So you got a greater separation of cyan on the DOC to green, and when you see those kind of breakaways, that and the amplitude of it really determines how strong your decline is. So you can see, though, that we're so far from the 76 that you're quite a ways. I mean, you're going to go down to 5,800 to even get close to it. So again, this is just the consolidation that's taking place while the uncertainty is real. U.S. has evacuated bases in Bahrain and these other places in the Mideast, bringing more aircraft carriers in, ultimatums and all sorts of rhetoric. I think the market is starting to ignore some of that because they recognize that he's not going to tip his hand. He's just going to do what he's going to do. But all things pointing in that direction look like if the Iranians don't cooperate within that, there's going to be additional escalation. So we got to prepare accordingly. And from the market standpoint, that's problematic. You saw crude draws already. So is that a question of people just stockpiling at the earliest point right now, preparing for something? In which case, then you're going to end up with a huge reduction in draw for the next month, and that will really tell the tale if that takes place, or you're going to see prices skyrocket. They're already way elevated, but you can see from a treasury standpoint that takes the Fed out of the game, which is a hamper on growth of that. But they're not wrong now, because with the oil spike, the justification is real from that. However, like I said before, that gets compensated with, because if you add to your evacuation of migrants, then you back off some of that demand. So can they deport as many people as needed to balance that? Probably not. That's not going to happen. And because of that, you're going to see some increase in inflation going forward in there. None of this is great news for the euro, but then again, they think the dollar is over. And if the dollar's not over, well, that's problematic too. But why do you want to be in the euro when you can get such a higher rate from a dollar in weaker position right now? I'm certain there's plenty of people who are seeing that situation and saying, does that make any sense? Uh, Without any new tensions, gold's hard to actually get a push as soon as you get an actual attack or some kind of significant retaliation. But the retaliation from Iran is pretty muted at this particular stage. So either they suffered some severe setback, or they're just not willing to escalate it at this particular stage. I think, like I've said before, most of their facilities are hardened and beyond the Israeli capabilities. Without the U.S. getting involved with their deep bunker busters, it's not all that devastating to Iran. It's just a question of whether the people have an issue with it, which, this is that same modus operandi they thought they were going to pull with Putin, and it doesn't work. From a Bitcoin standpoint, of course, matching where the Nasdaq, but with more severity in this particular case, but still holding right around that 76. And you had a pretty much drop off of the shorts. You just don't have any new buyers jumping into that scenario. So DOC takes precedence right there. You can see we're in a continuation mode where orange caught between cyan and red. You're going to get more of the same. So that is a weak offset generally. ETH pretty much identical in this particular. Now they've sort of like combined equalizing themselves. So we had talked about this with the MBI white spike that was appearing when we first talked about this one right here at the 50%. We said if another one takes place as soon as you get the breakdown, we could expect at least the break of the 50 in that case. And if it was persistent, you would definitely get to your zero. We just didn't know whether the zero was going to rise fast enough to catch it, or price would come down to it. Price came down to it. So either way, we still got the zero fill, which exactly what was expected, and that hasn't changed. You still have MBI white leading here on the 50K. So we like it. It's the readings. That's most important. So you had the optimism that came in at the beginning of the day, and then the Fed opening their mouths saying that he's not stupid, but that they're not doing anything, and they're not planning on doing anything for the rest of the year. So keep that one in mind. That as Trump pointed out, Powell's time has only months left, and I can assure you he will not be back. And then, of course, Trump floated the idea that he might name himself to the Fed. Wouldn't that be funny? Uh, but again, it's the humor of it, and just pointing out that the ridiculousness of it, though, is kind of odd because there is no reason not to add lower rates and add the liquidity. Not to mention, like you mentioned, also you'd have a massive cut in your deficit. Everything else, it becomes beneficial from that standpoint. Of course, they think that that's inflationary, and it's not what causes inflation. But you can't convince these people who think they know everything when they've proven to them they don't know anything. And we've seen this time and again. But that's okay. We just play the readings as they are. As always, though, anything relevant, I'll put on the Skype chat. Have a good one. Get ready for the holiday break coming up and keep going at it. Trade well.